Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am Aggelos. We are back again for another week of Ashes of Creation discussion. And if you paid attention to last week in episode 7, of Nodes and Nations, we were joined by special guest Davlos, who is back again this week, to continue our discussion on his essay, Nodes and Nationhood, Player Political Organizations in Ashes of Creation. I am once again joined by the one, the only, the errant penman, internet wordsmith himself, Isarii, back for the conversation. How are you, Isarii?
Hello, I'm doing good. I remembered for our video viewers that, we had been talking a lot about Eve last week, and so I came dressed as Eve.
You are
I am
stunning,
the universe.
sir. You are a universe. You are one in a million of stars, I guess. I don't know, whatever. I don't know where
We're
I
all
was
made
going
of
with
star
that.
stuff. Go with star stuff.
Star stuff. Yes. And back, special guest, Davlos, back again to continue our analysis of his essay. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks. Hello, I'm Davlos. I'm a diplomat from the guild Aduro. Aduro, we like PvP, we like PvE. We want to mess around the metagame. We want strategic thinkers. We want tactical thinkers. We want leaders. If that's up your alley, come talk to us.
Absolutely, and clearly, I mean, based on the fact that we are discussing his essay, it's incredibly well thought out, and we've been having a lot of fun with this. Like, I when I first read his article, as I mentioned last week on the last episode, that I had to bring him on. I think I messaged you a couple weeks ago, Davlos, and I was like,
yeah.
We got to get you on a Phoenix Roundtable to talk about this. And I've had this in the notes. Anyone who's had access to our notes, I know, Isarii, I gave you access to these notes. Nodes and Nationhood has been in here for a few weeks now as we've been trying to coordinate our schedules to get in here and talk about this. And last week, the conversation for these segments, generally we cut at an hour. We were only about a little over halfway through, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna have to cut this for this week, and we'll have to bring in for a part 2 because of the conversation and how much we were enjoying ourselves talking about it. So again, we're gonna go ahead and jump right on in to continue the discussion for this Phoenix Roundtable, the community discussion where we bring in members from around the Ashes of Creation community to discuss meta topics, big news, and other fun things. Nodes and Nations, political player organizations in Ashes of Creation. We are back with the hard power, soft power, and the effects of player morale, the next subsection within your essay. Davlos, I'm going to let you just take it away.
Okay, so in this subsection, I started off with a quote, not from any random scholar, but from The Witcher 3, because I really enjoyed this game. The writing was really on point, and when the character Dijkstra went on this little rant, I thought it really, really resonated with what I was trying to do, because I was kind of stuck writing this and said, I'll go play some video games. And I came upon this scene when Geralt, the Witcher, went to rescue some mages from the city. I forgot the name already. I'm awful. But towards the end of it, Dijkstra said, mass mobilization, inciting peasants to take up their scythes, straighten them. Where is the art in that? Much harder to build a strong state with healthy commerce, manufacturing, solid alliances, progressive science, and fair, independent courts that hand down just judgments. Vizimir and I managed to do just that through years of hard work. So that is exactly what my guild master Sigari and I and the members of Aduro are aiming to build. We want to build an empire which is not just about going around, roaming around the world and killing things, because obviously you want to do that, but there's going to be an objective behind that. We are going to want to coordinate with allies and crush our enemies under their foot, while under our feet, while those who live under our influence can have a great time playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the whole premise behind this subsection is to say, look, we love PvP, but we don't want to be hated for it, maybe only by our enemies, but we have to balance it so that we can achieve our objectives without making too many enemies and find ourselves boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
And in order to achieve that, we are going to have to find a way to maintain community goodwill towards us, and any alliance or any organization which wants to achieve that kind of goal has to maintain a fine balance between having public-facing personalities who go on to the forums, that's assuming they work properly, and going to the Discord servers and have like really civil discussions about the events going on in the game, so that other players would come to you. You know, I don't believe in going to specific channels and having a specific template and just spam Discord links. What I believe is that when people behave in a very appealing manner, okay, they will attract the best people. You don't need the most people, you need the best people.
Mm-hmm. One thing I really wanted to point in here, and I'm glad you actually made this point: hard power, soft power, and the effects of player morale. In order to achieve your goals, as you were saying, being liked by PvP, and the way this game has with systems in place. When I first read this, my first thought was, if you go around killing players, this reminds me of the old Ultima Online section with the red versus the blue. The people who had a bad reputation were known to have a bad reputation. And the quote you brought in, it's interesting that you brought that in, because I also love Witcher 3. But that is, again, human mentality of, it's not hard to, encourage these people to essentially take their pitchforks and forge them into swords. That type of mentality only happens under an oppressive type organization, where the people who were in the farms hit that breaking point where they can no longer live under the current conditions. And like you were saying, having to generate goodwill within the community, for any alliance who is within Ashes of Creation is going to have to do. If you start developing the bad reputation, it doesn't matter how many subjects you have. Eventually, they will hit a breaking point that if you abuse your serfs, the people under you, they'll rise up against you and try to take you out. Whether or not they can or not, a lot of rebellions have started in that same manner, where the local people were pushed too far, and therefore that was it. They were done. I mean, you and I talked a few weeks ago about Roman history. A lot of rebellions under Roman authority was when the local tribes and stuff who were not, especially in the later half of the Roman Empire, when the idea of assimilation, which was what they did early on, which actually cemented a lot of their power base. They assimilated tribes they took over into Romans. They became Romans, essentially. Whereas in the later centuries of the Roman Empire, they started allowing entire groups of people to no longer be assimilated. They're like, we're just going to put you in your own racially hegemonic camps and structures and stuff like that. But allowing people to remain in that way, it gave them a common ancestry, a common goal, a common just everything experience, and then followed by the negative reception that the quote-unquote Roman people had towards these non-Roman groups led to a lot of the racial tensions and revolts that happened, because it's like they're treating us like second-class citizens. And in World of Ashes of Creation, if you have subservient guilds, if you start treating them, as second-class citizens, they start going, this is no longer fun for me. I don't see the benefit. I got to break out.
Yeah, absolutely. Isarii?
Yeah, I always get a little bit cautious when people start dwelling a little bit too much on like real life history and the real life strategy, because I think, it's not just like, oh, it's a game, it's not that serious. It's just that games have rules, they have relatively simple systems that don't always translate one to one. And, I mentioned early on in last week's podcast, one of those filling in the gaps with your mind, where we don't have all the pictures and you can kind of get your hype rolling. And I think this is one of the big things, the big places where that happens is I remember in ESO's pre-launch, I'm sure Aggelos does as well, on our forums over at Tamriel Foundry, I'd see constant discussions about how people thought historical military strategy would translate into Cyrodiil, which was total nonsense, of course. And I'm not saying that's what this is going to be, because Ashes has much, much more in-depth systems already from what we know of it. But I don't know. I can't help but think about this is what after me and Aggelos had already been testing PvP in Cyrodiil, hearing people talk about like, oh, we're going to get our guild of Argonians because of their underwater racial, because they can breathe underwater. And like, we're like, let's see, we can't say this because there's an NDA, but one, you can't dive. Two, all of the water in Cyrodiil kills you as soon as you go in it. Three, Argonians don't even have that racial. So I always worry a little bit too much. Now, obviously, like I really like your article. I helped you promote it right at the beginning, so I'm hoping. Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Not one of those yeah. So I'm hoping it's not one of those cases, but I do want to be. I do want to. I think for my input, talk games.
Yes. Yeah.
So what I think, what I thought of when I was reading this part about soft power, where you can kind of attract players rather than try to subjugate them, was my favorite game, Star Wars Galaxies. And which is, like, me bringing up Star Wars Galaxies is basically total meme status on any of the Dungeon Crawler podcasts.
Yeah. It's not a show if you don't bring it up at least once.
But I thought about player cities, which are a very obvious analog, even though they were a lot simpler, where you would have a city and you were developing it, and they did have a political system that won't be that's not as fleshed out as what Ashes is talking about, but where players would come in and sort of decide how these cities would develop and what amenities it would have, and whether or not you had something like a shuttle port. Was a big deal for a trader who was wanting to come to that city. And I think that's kind of exactly what you're talking about that we've seen working in other far simpler games where, as nodes are developed, as the people in charge of those nodes decide, are we going to be a science node? Are we going to be a military node? What features? Because we know that cities will be able to do that. How much of their budget, so to speak, could be a specialization budget. Are they assigning to things like trade route guards, which we know will exist? The number of guards on your caravan has to do with the node you're departing from. I think all of those are going to be sort of soft power factors that attract people to you and make them want to be a part of what you're building. So I think basically, despite my leading in with naysaying, I think you're onto something. I totally.
I'm totally on board with like being cautious, because when I wrote this, I was telling everybody, when I was talking to people about writing this, I pretty much said, first and foremost, this is speculation. I don't know a lot of stuff, because obviously what has been given out to the public isn't a lot, really. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to base on, okay, this is human nature. Human nature hasn't really changed over the centuries or millennia. So I was trying to extrapolate, okay, when human nature is transferred into an environment like this.
I wasn't trying to knock it, by the way. I actually thought it was really interesting, and I think you're right in this case, or at least I want to. And that's what I'm always scared of. So I always have to temper it. I've been burned too many times, man.
The scars are real.
I've put money into Star Citizen. I exemplify that feeling, man.
Yeah.
I only have a little bit in Star Citizen, but I have a lot in Ashes.
Yeah, I have a lot in Ashes.
It could get worse. It could get worse.
I have a dozen ships in Star Citizen. Oh.
And I like what you're saying here, Isarii. Like when we talked about this before, and I actually want to throw this in here as well. Human nature doesn't change, which is why I think so much of this article is so relevant to Ashes of Creation, is because human nature doesn't change. It's how the systems limit how our nature can evolve, if you will, within the game.
I do think it's human nature to treat things differently in a game where there's no real life effect on your life than it is, within a real life system where if you're rising up, you might get killed. In a game, there's much more of a fuck it, YOLO, where people are a lot more willing to do that kind of thing. So
right,
it's not a 1-to-1, which is like, I'm not knocking it. I think this is a valid avenue. So I may have overstated my criticism there.
No, and it is a good criticism to have. But like something as simple as you were saying about with Cyrodiil,
I'm going to be the voice of caution all the way to launch.
That's fine. You need that for the hype train, because obviously we're all on the hype train, right? We're doing a podcast about Ashes of Creation before we even have a tangible product. It's just because we believe in the vision that they have. But when you're referring to military strategy within ESO, one of the limiting factors that I think that really hurt that game, and something that really could have played a factor in here, player collision. The idea of creating a shield wall, such as like what the Romans did and were so effective in real life history, the phalanx and stuff like that, was because you couldn't get through. You had 3 lines of men in a mandible system, or more, depending on how deep you really wanted it to go, that would prevent people from accessing further along. You then jump more into the game side of things, such as when ESO became, all right, so I'm not going to be able to defend a keep if I have far less players, because I can't line up a shield wall in a door and hold it, because they'll just Zerg ball me. There's no physical way in reality to get 100.
But you can run around spamming impulse.
Yeah, but something as simple as adding in player, I don't want to say simple because the hardware side of things, but in terms, the idea of player collision changes the way people react tactically versus everyone just stack on one person, which physics would not allow in the real world. I mean, without going full, Buffalo Bill wearing the skin kind of deal. You can't stack people inside of other people. But that idea could change if something as simple as player collision was something that was in the game. Because then those strategies of, all right, they've got 100 people, we've got 20, but the only way into this castle is through this gateway. We can just line up and their numbers count for nothing. Battle of Thermopylae all over again. The whole idea of numbers is negated when you can
Were you at the Chalamo?
Was I at the Yes, I was at Chalamo. Yes, I was.
My man.
Yes, okay. I was there too.
You just made me think about that in ESO.
Yes, I was there. I was there. And
can you tell anybody what that is? Is that worthwhile? Probably not.
It was.
We were immortalized. We're in the lore.
We are in the lore. It was a beta, it was like an alpha beta event where a lot of players and of course some developers had a massive battle at one of the massive keeps in Cyrodiil early on. So they thought it was so awesome that they immortalized us with like a book in the lore explaining of this battle at this keep that
you were probably you were in the bad guys though, right?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
There was a small group of us in the keep.
I was in the mass. I was in the mass.
Masses of people for hours before they ruined their PvP system to where that type of gameplay wasn't viable anymore.
Yeah, but that kind of thing can affect the type of gameplay you have here. And the same thing with, as I was going on here, I was trying to look at this. A lot of these systems that we're talking about now could be negated because human nature. No, the other system I was going to talk about is you're saying with your life, right? Yeah, of course you're not going to die.
Yes.
You don't die in this game. You don't die in real life. This isn't, this isn't, something along those lines. But there is still, and EVE Online is an amazing idea of this because there still is a tangible thing that people invest in. And that would be when you're a citizen of the node or say you own property in the node, it's not like previous housing and even Ultima Online where your house, regardless, could be surrounded by PKers. You could be hidden in your house and be fine. You stand to lose a lot if the node that you are a part of is destroyed. especially if you've invested insanely heavily in the node, whether through owning property, being a leader of men within that city as part of the player-run government, or even something like that we'll probably discuss on a later Phoenix Roundtable, the stock exchange. You've invested monetarily in the guilds and the systems within that node. If that node's destroyed, you're potentially losing large amounts of investment in both time and resources and cash, which in these types of games other than EVE Online and some very early ones, did not happen. Like, you lose a keep in ESO, oh well, who cares? Like, you don't lose anything as a player. World of Warcraft, you wipe in a raid, you don't lose anything as a player. This game, there will be a reason, going back into what we discussed last week with the human mentality of the human nature of being selfish. If you are a citizen of the node, you do stand to lose. It all depends on how much you've invested in that node to determine how much you're going to lose. If you're just a wandering vagabond who, I'm a citizen of the node, but I sleep in an inn all day, you're not as invested as the guy who's, I have the Main Street mansion because I invested in this in the village stage. I am a member of city council. You know, you have far more to lose than wandering citizen A. You know, there is that level of, and this is one of those systems that you get in what you get out what you put in, right? If you just want to be that wandering guy, you're not going to have a lot of attachment to any specific node other than, oh, I lost whatever passive buffs they granted me. Whereas being heavily invested in a node could affect, and it is part of what we said here, player morale. I'm sorry, but if I've spent the past 6 months building up a node, all right, 6 months is a good bit of time in any amount of game. I am the mayor of the node. I own a castle. I have the dragon mount that only mayors get. You can have her as long as you want. I know they said I just made up dragon. I don't know if that's really a thing, but I know they said that, flying mounts would be limited to like player run, or player, mayors and stuff. As long as you are in that position, like, you have reasons. My player morale is very much affected by my status in the game because I've invested a lot. If I lose my house that I've spent millions of gold on, like, ESO is a perfect example of this. I have the Daggerfall Overlook, which was like 3 million gold or whatever it was, 4 million gold. If for some odd reason someone were able to remove that, I would have lost a considerable amount of currency that is just gone to me now. And, that would affect my morale. Would I want to log in again after that? I mean, obviously, if you're invested in the game, it's different, but it does affect you differently if you've lost something. And player morale is something that, like, what you're saying, Davlos, with having to be part of this larger alliance, to want people to essentially come to you as being the little folk, the plebs, the people you need to fill out and sustain your empire. You need to be concerned with their well-being. Again, I love the history of Rome, so this is something I talk about. How did they pay their soldiers and stuff like that? I mean, they paid their soldiers, but what was one thing that was really something that they wanted? Land. Being able to dish out land to the various people, like, you have served me for 10 years or whatever the case may be, and when you retire from the army, you're getting this, and that created a bond of loyalty between the subordinate and the leader, because there was that level of, I was rewarded. Viking mythology, not mythology, Viking history and culture, the idea of gift giving was something that Viking chieftains would do in order to maintain loyalty and player morale, if you will. This guy's generous to me. Like, I fight for him because he's generous, and I like this. If all you do is take, you're not going to have the people who are going to stick around and help you build what you're attempting to build.
That's definitely something that can come into play within a guild. I think we've all experienced that to some point. But I think on the node level, as far as attracting people to sort of come into your alliance, that's something that's going to be more or less passively handled by the system. As you're progressing the node, you'll be unlocking benefits that are going to apply to everybody within your zone of influence, presumably. And that's not really something, it might be different, but I don't think there's going to be any option really for you to say, everyone else, I'm only researching benefits for me. Even if you're going after your own priorities, it's still going to apply to everybody, really.
But even adjusting something
because it is in the developer's interest for people to become invested in nodes like this. They want people to get hooked into this, even though they're not necessarily a part of the ruling class of the node.
Yeah, but not being part of the. Oh, go ahead, Davlos.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, when I talk about player morale, I'm not talking about giving. Okay, I know this is a game, but I'm not talking about granting material benefits to people who are part of the organization. I'm talking about less tangible stuff. I mean, yes, once again, this is a game, but when it comes to less tangible stuff, it's mostly about being treated fairly, being treated in a non-toxic manner. Like when people get disruptive, when they just scream down on other people and shut down all discussion, for example, those disruptive elements need to be taken care of swiftly and harshly so that everyone else under the zone of influence can go on with what they want to do in the game as they like. Because once again, this is a game, people log in and pay their X amount of dollars per month to enjoy themselves. So this is what I talked about in terms of credibility in this subsection.
Yeah. Well, the whole idea, you could make that argument that anything, because this is a game, even the digital house or whatever, is technically not tangible. Some people wouldn't care. You are dealing in a commodity. That commodity is the enjoyment level of the players who you are trying to recruit in. Whatever their enjoyment level is a commodity that you are providing. Like you could mention, like, even though it's not tangible, in this case it is tangible, regardless of how you want to divvy it out or how it's portrayed. Even toxicity being a negative counter, that's no different than someone stirring up rebellion against you. That is discontent that needs to be hammered out either through peaceful litigation or forceful expulsion, one way or the other.
Yeah, and then there's also the other element of the leadership, which needs to engage with the member base and keep them interested so they can keep on logging in. One of the main challenges in EVE Online is to keep people logging in and coming out for fleets, because sometimes when a conflict drags on for too long, like 3 or 4 months, people stop logging in. When your fleets used to be 200 strong, now there are only 80 people. And sometimes those 80 people are out tab out onto Netflix or something else. So in this case, that's what I'm referring to as player morale and how it plays a very huge role in maintaining some kind of cohesiveness so they can get things done in the game.
Well, yeah. I mean, I like how you bring that out, player morale, keeping people logged in. Even in a real life sense, why do you think, I shouldn't say every government, but some governments in general invest in the arts and things of that nature? The idea is entertainment is a way of keeping your populace pacified and happy and continuing to log in, so to speak, and be checked in. There is a certain level of, you have to provide the right level of services for your populace in order to continue to make them happy. A runaway budget for anything, like a pure military budget, if we'll say, at the expense of all else, is going to be something that will maybe drive some players away who are like, I really just want my basic services, and you're putting everything towards military, and I don't care. In terms of gameplay, we'll jump into gameplay. You're a very PvP focused guild, and you're trying to focus all of your services stuff in that area. you will be turning away a certain level of player base who's like, I don't really care about PvP in this regard. There needs to be a balance between what you need to defend your node, what you need to keep your player base happy, and even those who aren't directly related. And sorry, I'm glad you brought this up earlier. You said about having these nodes grow organically. They can grow organically. They can also die through player mismanagement of them. Being able to adjust tax rates. Okay, we have 2 identical nodes.
Is that actually something that's confirmed?
Yeah.
Okay.
They did say that is something you could. Now, of course, this is going to go towards the not military, but the funding of the node. Like, it's not going into the player pockets; it's going into the node pockets for whatever you're building your new stuff. But you have two identical cities. Tale of two cities here, and they both offer similar services. All right, and you have players who, like, this is where your organic growth comes in. What attracts people to move into your city? I can tell you as myself, I sure as heck don't want to move into New York. Why? Because their tax rate's nuts. Like, their cost of living in that area is so much higher than where I live here. You know, it doesn't attract me as a person because...
But on the flip side, I live in a major city because we have nice things, and I never have to shop at a Walmart or go to a fast food restaurant.
There you go.
Like, you couldn't, like, I pay a very high state tax, and you could not drag my out in the flyover country because there's nothing there. So there's, I'm not trying to disagree with you, by the way. I'm agreeing with your point, which is how you develop it, different people's priorities, and maybe striking a middle ground. I wouldn't move to New York either. But I wouldn't move to New York, wouldn't move to the Bay Area, because those are two extremes, as is Bumpus and Nebraska. You know, there are lots of happy middle grounds, and you probably want your node to fall within that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're looking at. Like, and that's, you agreed with me exactly. Even though we don't agree on what would attract us to a node, whatever services they offer. But now here's where your player agency comes into it. You have two nodes who are identical. Like, your city has been carbon copied, but the tax rate's 10% less there. You know, your city is 20%, they're 10% on anything you do. What would drive me as a player when I have no real connection to either one of these nodes, other than the fact that when I'm out slaying monsters, you're taking an extra 10% of my loot to go towards your treasury fund? That is
just
something.
To think of a few potential examples. I think what activity the player is involved in is going to play the biggest role, really, and what their priorities are going to be. I mean, I know I'm stating the obvious here, but one of the things I mentioned earlier was you can assign guards to trade caravans, which is going to be a really big deal to a trading type player. But a trader is also going to want really low taxes because they're going to be making the most profit. So they're going to want something that's focusing almost solely on the things that benefit trade the most. Whereas, we've heard something about scientific nodes potentially having portals.
A type of fast travel.
A type of fast travel, which I don't think would apply to caravans, because that would be kind of game breaking.
I'm sure they'll
potentially. I'm just making shit up as I go along at this point.
Yeah,
could be potentially very expensive to maintain. Like, that would be a big turnoff then. If they're putting a bunch of money from the budget that they're having to tax me for into providing this service that I don't care about. But lots of players will.
Right.
Lazy players.
Lazy play. Well, yeah, but that is where you have to. You have to strike that balance with the players that you're trying to attract. You need to attract as many people to your node to continue its growth. And for people, you want people to be invested in these nodes or in your guild or anything like that. Because the whole idea is when another guild comes up to siege, if you only got 50 people who are invested in the node, those are the only 50 people who are coming up to defend the thing. You're going to be like, oh, you've lost it. Whereas, creating that level of player, as Davlos was saying, that type of investment in creating that level of player morale and goodwill towards your alliance and organization is a way of making sure that people are chimed in, are invested in, are willing to actually stand up and defend what you are trying to build.
I really love the idea of, and this could be me getting on the Argonian army train, but I really love the idea of a political system that potentially has enough variability in it where you could see different factions within a node that actually have a platform. Like they have a stated platform that draws supporters to them, much like in a real life political system where it's, we want to focus on protecting our traders and running, almost no overhead on absolutely anything else.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that type of system would already exist within the scientific node, because the scientific node's election process is a democratic election. So being able to form your group going, listen, if I'm elected, we're going to lower taxes on this and we're going to increase, aiming, focusing on the needs of your power base, right? That is something that every politician is they make that concession. Like, why would you not care about, I don't know, whatever issue A is? It's because my power base, the people who keep me elected, don't care, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why you don't have, I don't want to bring
I'm
in.
I'm going to go start a fake news website for Ashes where I can just print complete and total fabrications about
onions of creation.
About leaders.
Yeah, onions of creation. I love it.
It's actually a solid name. It's so
actually
ridiculous.
really kind of I think I might be.
It's just so ridiculous.
GoDaddy,
Quick,
register
book.
domain.
Book that domain now. Do it.
Yeah, onions of creation. I like that, but that's just it. Like, you in these scientific nodes, the ones that allow for a 100% democratic election process to put people in power, you will probably see this level of, obviously, if people are have large followings, it's just like, vote for me because you follow DCN, right?
Yeah, that's probably what we're going to end up with, if we're being real here.
It depends on how. But again, would I vote for somebody who is a streamer just because they're a streamer? Maybe not, because if they don't really care for what I want out of it, why would I want to vote for them just so that they can be mayor or whatever? You're going to still have, again, in purely democratic elections, it doesn't matter. Whoever has the majority is the one who wins. So,
Davlos,
for all you know, it could also be the. Yeah, what's up?
Well, this might be where you're going. I'm not sure.
It could be the reality TV effect where someone could just make memes all year long and then they get elected because.
Harambe for president. Oh
no!
Yeah, because someone, I think Isarii should know, Reload, who makes the ZQ board guide to ships on YouTube. He just memes all year long, and he recently got elected to CSM.
Yes, that is what I was about to bring up. You were going there. What's the Council of Stellar Management is what it stands for? Is that we actually have an MMO with an election cycle?
Yes.
And someone memed their way to the presidency, much like real life. No.
Odd how video games are analysis to real life. All right,
I managed to stop myself from making that joke once, and then it came up again.
Yeah, it did. All right, we got to move on here because we've spent a lot of time on this one section because fantastic discussions.
Fair enough.
I really do hope we end up with a system that has granularity, because I think that's what's going to allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
If we have people actually allocating budget line items to the number and effectiveness of guards, as opposed to WoW's talent tree, where every time you level up your node, you get to choose one of 3 options.
Yeah.
I dependent on your node type, even being generous there. If there's actually a management portion to it, the potential is fairly limitless.
Well, I mean, like you said, that would be something that would be amazing. Like if caravan guards had a salary, right? In order to run that, you need to pay them 100 gold a day. So you're sitting there, okay, so we have 1,000 gold in our budget, for everything we're doing, and guards are 100 gold a day, and we get 1,000 gold a day. All right, well, we can afford to pay five guards to guard versus, you know, a full 10 and spend our entire budget here, but then we have nothing else. Like, if there's that level of granularity, like the more guards you want to hire, you have to increase your, you know, your
number of guards, quality of guards.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
equip for guards. Like, I don't think we'll get quite that level of granularity, but
it would be amazing if we did. I mean, that was that level of.
I would love to see sliders and numbers instead of, you know, perk. Guards are 25% more effective. You know?
Well, yeah, you're like, well, you could do something.
It's a give and take in a zero sum budget game.
Yeah,
or not zero sum because of taxes, actually.
Right. But, I mean, there you go. There's your perfect example of, all right, you got your fresh recruits. They're only 25 gold a day. Yeah, but they're also half as effective as the veteran guards versus the, you know, whatever, the champion guards. But champion guards are 500 gold a day because, well, they're essentially raid bosses. You know, like, there's that level of if you were willing to pay for raid bosses to guard your, you know, caravans, maybe that's something. But will we see that level of granularity in Ashes? It'd be amazing if we did. But again, fun times. Let's see. Next section here.
Who's this going?
Yeah,
the Germanic Dominion.
Yeah, Dominion forever.
I was trying to figure out what it was.
Yeah.
I think it was a strawberry limeade mint cachaça drink, and it was good.
So you may pass out here.
No, all the allergy meds, but no, I'm good.
There we go.
Okay. Right. So this subsection of a Germanic Dominion was to address this common line of questioning which came up in the Discord server many times of saying, oh yeah, you know, if we're going to have separate little servers of like maybe 5,000 people concurrently online, that one server can be dominated by one huge guild and the server would die and the game would die. And my counterpoint to that is not necessarily all the time. Like I addressed in last week's podcast where I said, no, you could have a huge alliance, okay, that can normally, in conventional terms, stomp on you. But if you think laterally and approach it in different ways, or just sometimes just wait it out, because when people dominate for too long, they just lose interest and say, I'll go play Battlefield instead. You know, screw this. It's boring, you know.
Like you mentioned last week, Imperium is a really good example of that, where Eve is a very fair game where everybody just found a way to work the system and, you know, band together to take them down and drive them out of relevant space, so to speak.
Yeah.
But what's important to keep in mind is that Ashes of Creation is not a fair game. Volatility, stability is a slider, where if a server is, you know, getting overwhelmed and the devs are looking at that, they can just turn up the dragon slider and just wreck. You know, it's very much how effective guilds are at holding on to nodes and holding on to cities and metropolises is a slider, and it's something, you know, I'm not really worried about somebody being able to dominate a server like that, because if that's something that turns out to be unhealthy, that Intrepid is worried about it, they can fix it.
Yeah.
The NPCs are an effective third faction.
Yeah. Or like sometimes, let's say if a guild that grows so quickly and they don't really have a control on like how the members behave, okay, and possibly they don't have enough income to maintain the nodes, because I would expect that if you want to run your empire, the game is going to say, okay, you're going to have to pay up X amount of gold per month to upkeep this place. Otherwise, it's just going to like go back to from level 5 to level 4. I have no idea, but I can probably expect a mechanic like this to exist. Okay, so and probably if the developers want to make sure that people don't gain entrenched advantages, there's also going to be this gold sink mechanic. So let's say if a guild grows too fast and expands everywhere, they would not be able to maintain all the nodes at the same time. Then their borders may end up shrinking and balance is achieved.
Roman Empire again. It eventually grew to the point where it couldn't sustain itself and started to collapse back down.
Although any system can be gamed, I believe you'd already be required to be technically separate guilds if you're running different systems.
Well,
like,
yeah,
you know,
there is a cap.
metropolises.
There is a cap for guild. Here's something that we
Well, I
thought
think you
about.
can only. I think you can only be involved in one city's politics at a time.
You can only be a citizen of one node as on a character. Yeah, they've stated that before, but you're right. Your sub guilds could rule others. Here's a factor that I just thought of as I'm sitting here. The idea, and sorry, you and I talked about this a lot. The fact that resources in the world are finite and could possibly be stripped out of an area. What happens if the node that was leveled up was built upon, like I said before, a very rich node of Mithril, but when that's gone, what still drives that city to be a metropolis, especially in this idea of, hegemony controlling everything, right? Like you've already spread your player base out and you've grown, but you've stripped every major city that you've had, you've already stripped the resources. You are out. You have nowhere else to maintain because you've already capped out your nodes. You're going to start seeing shifts of people going, guys, we're no longer at a sustainable area. We need to start moving out and allowing these cities to decay and move along in order to, find more resources. We cannot maintain this city because we have no more resources with which we built it up originally.
Potentially. I mean, at a macro level, resources are respawning, but there is no guarantee that they're going to reappear in an area that's convenient to your current metropolis.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting. I would think that metropolises that have been built up over so much time and effort and leveled up and have perks and an economy already functioning would probably be able to offer perks beyond just their proximity to resources. But I could easily imagine sort of outlier cases where that's not true.
I could say that
in some small percentage of time, maybe.
No, even or I keep coming back to real life examples. Yes. Because this happened again, I'm going back to Roman Empire here again, the idea of the rise of Constantinople as a capital versus Rome becoming almost a backwater, especially in the later half when the emperors didn't even visit Rome in their lifetime. Because Rome became essentially a backwater where because it wasn't centrally located in the empire, it became more of a hassle to maintain, and they moved their center of government to other areas. Like you said, convenience is a thing, and with no fast travel, eventually you're going to hit a point where it's like, guys, we can't even compete in any way, PvP, PvE, because we're running around in iron weapons now because we can't get the resources because they're too far away. We need to move to a more centrally located area within our empire in order to maintain our growth and our control over these areas.
Yeah, and then again, who's to stop a player from having 4 different outs in 4 corners of the empire to just log in there when something's being attacked?
Right, but again, with no fast travel, what does that matter? I can be sitting on a pile of gold in South Africa. It does me no good where I'm at now. And how am I going to get it to me?
Well, you email somebody and you tell them that you've happened into a pile of gold and that they send you a small fee. You'll be able to transport that gold to their country, and then everybody will be rich together.
There you go.
Yes.
Who wouldn't say yes to that?
You need to be a prince as well.
I can easily be a prince if I have a pile of gold.
That would definitely help.
Yeah, that is a thing. But I mean, there is that level. I mean, again, we're talking player base, but eventually it becomes a point where, at least in my eyes, when a city starts running out of its resources and the player base, again, this is dealing with player morale and the ability to want to log in. Why would someone want to log into a city that all the resources are gone? All the raid bosses, for instance, I don't know how we're going to handle that, but almost everything is essentially a daily quest. Why would I want to stay here when I hear of greater riches to the south, or whatever the case may be? You're going to have your players who start becoming discontented from maintaining within the city walls and want to venture out, and now you're steadily bleeding populace because they're leaving.
I do think
there's definitely the potential, I would say, for
your persistent resources to move away from the city to where that
Yeah.
portion of gameplay becomes inconvenient. But I do think players that are, interested in being like gathering is my thing that I do, or crafting is my one thing. Even combined, I believe that they're sort of in the minority of players. At least I can never find enough of them for my guilds. But I don't know that we'll get a situation where the PvE content runs out around a metropolis, because the idea is that at that point you've got players congregated together, so we're just going to spawn bosses on top of them.
Right.
I could be
Well,
wrong.
even if that does happen, you could always the leaders of that metropolis could always just choose to say, you know what, that neighboring city does look very nice. We'll take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean it is something that
But
even
that's the migration Aggelos is talking about,
Oh yeah. There's that, but
where the
You could
original
also have,
node decays
yeah.
in favor of another location.
I would say that there might still be a possibility of keeping it alive in the sense that, okay, you have a nice metropolis. There are only like 4 others in the world, and it might have the best facilities in that region to refine ore.
Mhm.
Because if you refine ore at a level 1 smithy, it would be like it could have 25% of waste, whereas in the metropolis it's only 1%. So if there are mechanics in place to ensure that there's a reason for that metropolis to stick around unless an opposing power topples it, that can be a possible solution.
That's what I was thinking at first as well. That I would hope metropolises have an array of selling points that are stronger than merely their proximity to resources.
Right.
Yeah, but how inconvenient that gets will be a factor. I mean, there's definitely, I think, the potential for a nightmare RNG scenario where these persistent resource points just don't spawn around one node. Given enough servers and a long enough timeline, it will probably happen. Where it's just wildly inconvenient to trek it back and forth, and
Right.
that would be really cool.
I mean, you're going to pay more in
Good old
taxes
resource
and-
curse.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, obviously, the takeaway is that you want to be the centrally located node, where you can be sort of the Sinai Peninsula. God, now even I'm talking about history. This is the worst. Of your server, where you're connecting multiple empires that have to travel through you if they want to do trade or travel their trek their own resources about. Not everybody will have that opportunity, but
yeah, but
if
then you
could,
also become that hot
make that a
spot
commerce
where
node.
you're because you're the area that everyone travels through. You're now also the border of where everyone's at, and therefore you become
Suddenly,
the no man's
3 major
land.
religions are in there. You don't know what's going on.
And this is actually, and I'm going to lead this into our next section here. The change of the guard, if you will. A metropolis may have certain systems in place, but when the current leadership is changed, and therefore the harmony within the city is adjusted and moved around, and maybe even the priority of the cities are changed from leader to leader, because that is something it's been said they're gonna be able to do. I don't like first rule of government: blame everything on the people before you. We're gonna change everything that they've done. That's gonna create a
You guy comes in, starts disrespecting your allies, saying they won't honor the treaties other people have agreed to.
yeah,
It'd be crazy.
exactly.
Really
Strong
crazy.
and stable leadership. Strong and stable leadership.
And that leads
Cough,
us
cough,
into
the
the
kingdom.
next section, which is evolution and player interpretation of election mechanics and nodes.
Yes.
We'll go ahead and jump on that.
Okay, so like I said earlier, I was hoping for like different methods of election or choosing of the leaderships within different nodes, because to paraphrase what I said prior, sometimes it's not really relevant to what's really important to the game or how it's going to play out. For example, you may have the largest amounts of gold in the game, but you're really bad at making money. Like all you do is to just accumulate money, but you don't invest. So when you have probably millions and millions of gold just sitting there in your bank account, okay, and by
Jealous
virtue
can
of
relate
that,
all too closely to this.
Yeah, and so by virtue of that, you become the governor of the economic node, and it doesn't really benefit anyone.
Mhm.
So I was hoping that there could be maybe a side mechanic to say, hey, it's not working out. How about we elect someone based on how much they are able to earn or their ability in negotiating terms with a neighboring node. Okay, and then maybe there's also another side mechanic of saying, hey, this guy is having like real life issues, like touch wood, the house burned down. They cannot log in anymore. We cannot let this community be rudderless for the next 3 weeks. It should have this provision to transfer power over to another user.
But that
I wonder if there will be a mechanism to change the method of government in a node outside of that method of government, where you could have an oligarch-based system that's screwing everyone over, and they come in with their glorious communist revolution for the people to overthrow that leadership, even though they don't have cash. Is the siege the mechanism for that?
I would almost think the only
sieges.
The way they described it to me,
it could just be it.
Or the way we described it is players aren't going to have a choice of a node. Like when a node levels up as you're doing quest, you kind of know what it's pre-programmed. At least I don't know if it's hard programmed, which I hope it's not. I hope it's kind of random. And this is the reason why. When you start leveling up the node, you start seeing what type of node it's going to be based on the NPCs that are going to be there. So like if you're doing stuff and the encampment shows up and all of a sudden it's all priests who are there, it's a divine node, right? Merchants, etc. That's how you can tell what a node's going to be.
I actually hadn't been interpreting it that way, but I think you're probably right. And the reason is art assets.
Yeah.
For city layouts.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have that level. But I'm hoping it's not static, because how do you get rid of an elite oligarchy? Like you said, the siege mechanic, where you destroy the node, and when the node resets to 0, does it roll the dice again to go, okay, am I a divine
then
node?
My art asset theory is out the window.
No, it's not necessarily, because art assets...
Because they'd still have to build a city for that location.
Well, they actually pretty much said that the city would develop based... I think they've already pre-built the cities, but it's more like placeholder kind of stuff. Like, okay, this is where building our Tavern A is going to go, but they pretty much said that how the cities will develop will be based on the amount of racial interaction. So Tavern A is always going to be on the corner of, Chestnut and Walnut Street. But whether or not it looks more orcish or elven or human depends on, what that's going to be. I think that's how we're going to see things. But in terms of, like you said, with the election mechanics, if you're not happy, the only way I can see it is the node rolling dice, essentially, to go, okay, when it resets to 0, it re-rolls the dice going, what am I? It could still be another divine node, or it could become a military node afterwards.
I would hope that you'd be able to choose it. And they thematically, it could be sort of early on what the very first mayor starts investing in, determines what NPCs are attracted. But if they're building in the assets and they're building each node layout, assuming that they don't all just have the same layout and flatten the terrain around them as the city begins developing, if they're building every node with the potential to develop into every government type, I would hope they just put that in the hands of the players instead of having it be, city loot box edition, where you roll the dice and see what you get, because that would be a bit shit.
See, and that's how I see it, though. I really think that everything is already pre-planned, and like the big buildings that would really attribute, City Hall A.
If every node only develops into one type, that I would understand. Like, maybe we built in within like Zone of Influence America, we put our metropolis in Pittsburgh. A state probably would have been a better example. But maybe we got to move it quarter mile down the road to another node to get a different type, because the assets that are built here will always be science. I could see something like that from a technical level. But but I'm repeating myself again. If every node has the potential, has the layout, has been designed in a way that it could roll into anything, if that groundwork has been done by the dev team, I don't see any reason you would remove player agency from the process.
Yeah, and then furthermore, I mean, when it comes to elections, let's say even if there are no there's no variety of ways or methods of election, what I was further speculating about was how, okay, fine, your scientific node may have only elections and just elections, but there may only be a total of 10 candidates and 6 of them are in the pocket of one guild. Mm-hmm. You see? Because there's another layer beneath those elections where they will say, okay, we just game the system.
You're right. The science node could also be an oligarch node.
Yeah, exactly.
Imagine that.
Or take another step. For example, the military node where, okay, fine, there's going to be an arena match, but only 2 people are allowed to join, and only one of them is allowed to win. If 3 or more people are going to join, we will target you and we will wreck your stuff. That kind of thing.
And that kind of thing will definitely happen. I mean, it happened in ESO with Emperor trading was a big thing where people would, essentially target other people, like sending messages and stuff to them, like, you need to log out right now because this next guy is the guy who's going to get Emperor. Like there were things that they would do. They would intentionally mess with other people in order to, and that kind of, I mean, that's politics for you, right? Like that level of back level. I mean, elite oligarchy could exist even in a military node. Hey, I'll pay you to take a fall. That level of
or gear disparities, like I was talking earlier. Yes. If gear is a factor in those competitions, like I imagine it will be, unless there are options to rule that out completely. With fight, what was I talking about? Like pre-planned, rules
Agreement
of engagement,
rules,
essentially. Then the economic side is going to factor in there as well.
But do you really want to remove, and as much as we hate it while it's happening to us, do you really want to remove that? I don't like removing things from the player's hands. That back level, behind closed doors stuff.
Did you just say you wanted nodes to be an RNG role?
True. But in that level, the player still has agency to go, do I want to level this or do I just want to let it decay and let it roll again? There's still that player agency there. And I wasn't saying I was in
I'm
favor.
not buying this.
I wasn't saying I was in favor of RNG roll. I'm more in favor of, like you said, either having RNG roll to determine a node or allowing players at a very early stage to determine its growth later on. I don't want to see pre-programmed where this city on a hill is always a military node. If you don't want a military node, you don't build there. That level of because eventually someone is going to create a map showing every possible city with every possible thing going, city A here is scientific. That's what you want. In which case, then we're going to start seeing trends. Again, it's easier to see trends in server growth when everyone knows that, okay, this is the most centrally located economic node. If you want the most out of an economic node for auction house purposes, this is the one you level.
Yes.
So once that's out there, every server will eventually start going, well, it's more feasible if we level this node. You'll start seeing common trends along every server. If it's at least random to it, and this is why I'm in favor of random, it's because then you start seeing different growth because, again, why not choice? If the system if the way it's being designed can handle random, it could handle choice just as easily. It could. But again, the only reason why I favor random is because then we start seeing different stories evolve on different servers.
So you're worried about a meta.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Because everyone's going to be like, you level up city C.
Sorry, I thought you were talking about meta. If build types were determined by
I'm talking city meta. That's why I'm in favor of the random roll to see what it is. That way, that central city, the Cyrodiil city, that major city in there is everyone agrees that's the best economic city because it's in dead center of everything. But if you roll as a military, it goes, now we can't do that if we want to, have a better economic growth. So that's why I'm kind of in favor of the roll. you know. Because again,
Well,
I see the value
even
there.
if there's a role and there's no like direct choice, what's to stop me from hiring a bunch of mercenaries to say, hey, you see this node? We don't want it. Can you just burn it down for us so they can redo it?
Basically, that would be an expensive pain and it would demoralize everybody involved.
yeah,
But it is. But
Yeah,
there's a very but
you
if there's a
could- you
very
could do
specific
it,
objective,
but it would be
to-
very, very
that's
hard.
communicated. Yeah, if there's a very specific objective that's communicated to line members to say, hey, we want this to be a science node only because we already have a science node next door and it will be redundant. So if you don't mind, we'll just burn it again. If you lose any of your holdings, we'll compensate you. That kind of thing.
but someone's still having to provide that cost, that capital up front, because even in order to initiate a siege, as they said before, the amount of resources eventually. Especially if it's RNG roll, it could roll again. And you could get it scientific again. You know?
More importantly, though, there, metropolises exist, as I understand it, sort of within 5 big regions, and you can only have one metropolis in each. If it's a random roll, I think that does mean you're going to have all of these developing simultaneously, vying for supremacy. If there is no element of control over what's going to develop, that does make the choice of which city do I want to support a lot more compelling than if you're able to choose the perfect meta city. I guess I'm coming around on this RNG idea a little bit.
RNG is not always a bad thing. It just most often is.
Yeah, this is definitely one where it could make the player's choice more compelling.
Yeah.
Enhance agency by taking some of it away.
Right.
Which is
You
interesting.
just pray the dice gods. Just pray to them.
Raise the dice gods.
But I mean, that could shift power, because if you have a group who's saying, okay, I'll recoup you for the cost of destroying this node so I can have the meta city, eventually no one's coffers are endless, and who was once an economic superpower now just spend all of their stuff on trying to rebuild the city, and now they realize we have nothing anymore. We've driven ourselves into bankruptcy because we refuse to let go of a dream. That's players can have that opportunity.
That's the beauty of play agency. Yep.
It is. And the final topic before we finish out with this amazing discussion, game mechanics required for the facilitation of great power politics.
Yeah. Okay, so once again, I apologize to viewers who are a bit tired of the EVE references, but this is the sandbox that a lot of people kind of take a reference to when they want to give players the maximum amount of agency. My first interest is in having a specific forum section in the official forums at the very least, which allow only for the guild masters and probably 3 nominated guild officers, to be able to talk only in a specific section of the forum, which may be publicly viewable, but only the GM and the nominated officers may talk in there. And this is to reduce spam. Okay, wow. Different hoodie. This is to reduce spam and posting from other folks.
Right.
Okay. Yep. And also, you get to see that what people the politicals, and those who are in charge, and to see what they have to say.
Right. You mean almost like a public forum, but as a non-member of the Senate, it's kind of like us watching C-SPAN. We can watch what they're saying. We don't have a lot of... I mean, the only real agency we have is when it comes to next election cycle. If we didn't like what your stance was, you may get voted out of office.
Yes. And also at the same time, it's like watching the General Assembly of the UN.
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at?
Yep.
And the second one is the implementation of a kill board, so that there's a public record of who died, who killed whom, where, what time. So that there will be great transparency on the events of the game. Mainly because in other MMOs, that there really isn't much in terms of transparency or really accurate statistics tracking. So there's going to be a lot of like chest beating and bragging and whatever, which isn't really substantiated, or sometimes it's seen only in very heavily edited videos, which cuts out a lot of the bad stuff.
Right.
That makes you look bad. Yeah.
Yep. Cut out all the fights that you lost in.
Yeah, pretty much. So this will give all players a very accurate tracking tool of the performances of each organization, so that they will know, okay, I want to join this one, but do they die a lot whenever they fight, or do they win at least half of the fights that they get into? This also can lead into looking into, okay, this mercenary group sounds good. Okay, the GM seems to know what they're talking about. But then when you look at the kill board, oh my god, they have not logged in 2 months.
Right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, those types of things would almost be dependent upon a very robust web API, unless it was something within game.
Yeah.
Which it still favors the same thing, being able to view these stats, almost like an armory type system, like what WoW would have for at least statistics wise.
Yes.
Yeah, the type of tools needed for power. I still think a lot of this, and again, I go back to the cloak and dagger. Some things are not going to happen in a public forum because you don't want them to be known it's happening in a public forum. And it's the same idea of not tying a guild to an account, because the idea of, again, Eve with the creating an alt in order to infiltrate a guild to, work your way up is only possible with a certain level of anonymity that comes with those backroom dealings. So I do agree in terms of the election process, having some sort of essentially stance, because again, I can see when it comes time for an election type system, especially in terms of like the scientific node with the democracy, not everyone is online at the same time, right? Like, why if I'm standing up campaigning for my cause at 9:00 Eastern, is that going to be a proper time for Davlos to come on and see me campaign? Possibly not. And therefore, how does he know I'm any different from group, Isarii, who is, also promoting at that time? Being able to write in a public forum, like you said, that's limited, to allow for those, here's my speech, this is why you should elect me. I can definitely get behind something along those lines.
Basically, it's going to be a platform for content where it's gatekeepered, unlike the kind of discourse online that we have right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, even with the unofficial Discords and stuff like that, the only gatekeeper is whether or not I choose to invite you. And again, that becomes backroom dealing, because there's no way in the world that everyone uses Discord, or whatever the forum is. It doesn't mean they have access to it for whatever reason.
Yeah, if you don't use Discord, you don't deserve my vote.
That's pretty much how it goes. And I like the idea of a public record for showing these people as being bad or whatnot. I'm curious, like the idea of, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the thought I really had here for the player. Like almost like it kind of reminds me of what was it, Arcade? You had the player run justice system where people got sent to court.
It didn't quite work out right, but it was fun.
I mean, certain level of trolling does happen. I mean, that happens to us, even in such places as Reddit, for instance. If I offended a group of players, they can go downvote anything I post, not for any merit reason, but just because they don't like me as a person. And we saw that happen quite a bit in Arcade, where someone is accused of a crime, and then the opposing guild happens to be on the jury, you're not getting a biased opinion here. How are you gonna identify that?
There wouldn't be based on the killboard mechanic that I proposed, there wouldn't be any kind of like jury or court system. It's just very plain and simple numbers. Like, here's how many times this player was corrupt. Here's how many players this guy killed when he or she was corrupt. You see, so it also provides a way of saying, okay, I'm gonna screen this applicant who wants to join my guild. Let's see their record. Oh wow, this guy has been corrupt for like twice a day.
Right.
And he wants to be security for my caravan? How about no? It could be a plan from someone else.
You're right, but there's also that level of what if, and I'm going to kind of go into a role play section here. What if I'm trying to be an assassin one way or the other, and you don't want your... The corruption mechanic happens whether or not you're spotted. You and I are alone in a forest, I stab you in the face. You die.
Okay.
I still get corruption, but no one was around to see me. In a real life situation, unless you could get evidence that I murdered you, I'm innocent until proven guilty. The problem with these killbot mechanics is it would record my corruption regardless of if I was caught for the crime. And if I'm trying to infiltrate a guild, right? And I am an assassin for whatever the reason may be, whether or not I'm willingly taking this corruption onto my character, but I'm stealthily trying to kill you. Being able to look up a killbot status on me going, wow, he's had corruption a bunch. It kind of takes the gamey mechanic in there going, that's why I'm kind of opposed to that level of system. Now, I'm fine if the person was caught, like hunted. Okay. It would be interesting with a killbot if the person was killed by a bounty hunter. It would count as a corruption kill. If they're not killed by a bounty hunter, they got away.
Yeah.
And it's not put on their record. You know what I mean? I totally agree with you. That's how the killbot is supposed to work. Like, for example, if I run a pirate guild, and this applicant claims to be an experienced pirate, but has only gone corrupt once, something's wrong. Right.
It works both ways.
Yeah, it's true. Unless they're a really good pirate, and therefore, they've never been caught. You know, like that's kind of no good thief is a famous thief because that means they've been caught. It's
like you are the worst pirate I've ever heard of, but you have
heard of me. Exactly. You have that that type of idea. That's. I do like the idea of having some sort of, you can look at a history like a permanent record, but that's the same with me, quote unquote, shoplifting. Okay, I shoplifted. I never was caught. I don't have a thief stat versus I was caught and now I have a permanent record. But if you don't design that kill or the bot counter to only pick up when you are caught or, bounty hunted, it negates the system because you don't want anyone to be able to look at, especially in this case, especially with this level of intrigue. I don't want to look at Isarii and go, oh, wow, he's been corrupt. Every time he gets corrupt, he gets a tick counter going, oh, he's been up. Yeah. Then I know he's a PKer. But he's never been caught in game. Like, he's never died. But that negatively affects his play style. Or not play style, what he's trying to accomplish. I don't like using the term play style because that's like an entitlement type thing. Like, oh, my play style has to be allowed. No, he's PKing because that's what he wants to do. That's the type of persona he is having, and whatever his goals happen to be will be negatively affected if he's getting a count timer anytime he PKs someone, and I can go to ashesofcreation.com/armory and look at Isarii and go, wow, he's PK'd 100 times, but he's never been caught. It's kind of...
It's interesting.
It takes away.
I think those kinds of systems, things like kill boards are really, really interesting. Lifetime kills, corruption even would be... I think that'd be really interesting to track, and for a lot of people would be kind of an EPing thing. But, You're right that in a sense it is sort of metagaming. It's something that it's gamey, much like leaderboards I was talking about, where it kind of pulls you out of the world. And if you're sort of shooting for like an immersive experience where you're really getting into your character, or you're trying to AWOC someone, that type of tracking is something that could get in the way of it and lead you towards alts, which I'm not sure I have strong opinions on this either way, but yeah, there's I think both pros and cons, and I'm not really sure which I think is preferable. Having that sort of detailed tracking through a web API or not.
Yeah. To those who don't understand what AWOX means, it's named after a player named AWOX who basically put off a friendly fire incident and took out the loot for himself. And so that act is named after AWOX.
He was part of a group in Eve, if I'm remembering this correctly, where he would basically like infiltrate the group and then lure his actual friends to the group to kill everybody.
Yes.
And take all their loot. Yeah.
Right. And
so basically, yeah, it's sort of been misappropriated to refer to any sort of like infiltration technique, really.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that kind of brings us to the end of the discussion of Nodes and Nationhood, a look at player political organizations within Ashes of Creation. I definitely want to thank my community co-host here who came on, Isarii, internet wordsmith, and the errant penman himself. Thank you so much, Isarii, for coming on the show.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Where can players find you and all of that fun stuff?
Okay, so players can find us on the official Discord. We have one of the usual lines and descriptions and Discord links in the channel named #guild_recruitment. If you cannot really find that, look for Sigari, my guildmaster, SIIGARI, okay, or myself, Davlos, DAVLOS.
Okay.
If you are a strategic thinker, if you like to think big picture, if you are a leader in naval combat in ArcAge, or you're a PvP leader, we want you. Come talk to us.
Excellent. And sorry, where can people find you?
Oh, all the usual places. Players can find me mostly either on Twitter at twitter.com/EthanMcPhee, EthanMacFie, or on my own website at errantpenman.com. I've also been experimenting a lot. It's kind of starting to supersede my writing because I enjoy the learning on YouTube at youtube.com/c/Isarii, Isarii. And I also write for MMOgames.com, MMORPG.com, Gamespace.com sometimes. And we even have a new Ashes of Creation projects in the works. We're not really ready to unveil all the details yet, but we're pretty excited about it, and it's probably only a couple weeks out.
And I'm helping.
Yes!
Yeah!
Yeah. I'm kind of all over the place in Ashes of Creation.
I also want to give
a lot of the old crew showing up.
Yeah, one big shout out to AOC Spot, who have been very gracious enough to host my article and format it into a readable format because I'm awful at it. And also for Isarii for, spreading the word around because I knew nobody.
When I read it, I thought, hey, this is a really good piece of writing that deserves something better than being a Word document that's getting passed around. And I think AOC Spot had just followed me on Twitter that morning or something, and I was like, oh yeah, there's a fan site out here. So let's get you in Discord together. You two need to do something together.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
And it also spun into 2 episodes worth of a podcast to discuss it all.
Yeah, content.
Content. And it was definitely fun. All right, you can find me, Aggelos, on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_WOF. Aggelos everywhere else. You can find me Discord, the official Discord, our own community Discord, which you can find the link to over at DungeonCrawlerNetwork.com. You can find the links to all of our stuff there, and as well as in the description below. Definitely check that out. I honestly just say go to Dungeon Crawler Network, scroll to the very bottom of the page. There's hyperlinks to our YouTube, our Twitch, everywhere else. Just search Dungeon Crawl Network, you'll find us. I definitely want to thank Isarii for coming on to this Phoenix Roundtable, as well as Davlos. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we thank you, the listener, for listening, and we will see you in Ashes of Creation. See you later, everybody.
Bye.